Hello and welcome to Blood and Ashes, your brand new favorite Wheel of Time spoiler cast. I'm joined today by my two great friends, Jody
Hello.
and Villy.
Good day.
Gentlemen, are you ready for this epic journey?
Indeed, I am.
We were born ready.
It's been at least 20 years of readiness, of preparedness going into this, so we'll be fine.
It's the roles we've been preparing for our whole lives.
Everything else led up to this.
Yes. So we are obviously going to be talking a lot about spoilers. So if you've somehow made it past the episode descriptions and the teaser trailer highlighting the fact that this is a spoiler cast, be warned, we will be spoiling the entirety of the Wheel of Time on an almost constant basis. We will also be prone to using some profanity as our passion for the series bleeds through the microphones. So just be aware of the fact that if you listen to this in the car with the kids on the way to school, maybe switch to the Wiggles. Okay, now, gentlemen, before we get started, I thought it might be a good idea for all three of us to give the listeners a bit of a brief history of our own relationship with the Wheel of Time. Starting with you, Villy. When did you start reading the books, and how much of the series have you actually read?
I have read up to book 11, and then life caught up with children and such. But I was introduced to this series by yourself at the young age of 22, I believe. And it's been a constant in my life, a good topic of discussion when we get together. So I'm all too happy that we are doing this at the moment.
I believe you've also owned multiple sets of the actual books.
Yes, again, buying a whole new set.
Excellent. It is good to do. How about you, Joe?
Very similar. I was probably around the same age and also introduced to it by you, Moritz. I do recall a very poignant moment sitting at Triton's eating a plate of chips with you on my lunch break with Tabasco sauce and a pint, and you telling me all about Trollocs and trying to get me to read the books. I remember that clear as day.
That tracks.
That sounds good. I'll give this a try. I must have been in the early 20s as well, yeah. And then after that, you just took over my life, as the series does. This will be my third reread. I suppose technically my second reread, but yeah, third time reading it. So hopefully I can get a bit more out of it this time.
I'm sure. I mean, surely every time you read it, you get more out of it. And with this read through, the entire point of this podcast is to squeeze every last bit of joy and enjoyment out of this reread.
Well, you've called the right two guys for that.
I sure did. I started reading the series when I was in high school. I think I was probably about 16. I was on a bus trip once, and I had a guy sit next to me in the bus, an old friend of ours, who basically told me the entire plot of The Eye of the World in an hour and a half. After which I then went and obviously read the book and kept going up until I caught up with the books. Around book 8, I was in my final year of high school when the books started coming out as they were published, so I had to wait. And yeah, I think I read the entire series up until the point when Robert Jordan passed away, and then reread up until his last book before Brandon Sanderson's first edition came out. And then obviously kept reading on from there, which was only 3 books. But yeah, call it my third reread with a couple of gaps in there.
For sure.
Okay, so Jody, why don't you get us started on the prologue?
Oh, yes. Ye old Prologue, Dragonmount. Yeah, this is a writing technique that there's a couple of Brandon Sanderson videos online if you're keen to watch them. He has a university course, and you can watch all of his videos online for free, all these classes.
I've watched a bunch.
Yeah, I figured as much. So anyway, one of these writing techniques is that you just drop the reader straight into something fantastical like this. Don't start at the beginning like in chapter 1. So this prologue is exactly that. We are dropped into a scenario here. It was the first time we meet Luz Theron. And on this note, I also did try to do some research, and I tried to watch that FX series, the pilot that they did.
Emphasis on tried.
Like, I remember I watched it once and I got through it, but the second time I just couldn't do it. It is just incredibly bad. I thought I would glean something from it, but that didn't happen.
Oof.
Just one thing from that where I lost the plot was when Luz is running around the palace calling for his family. He calls for his son, who is named Luz Jr. And then I thought, no, that's a
Oh
bit
my
liberal.
God.
Yeah,
I
kid you
don't, I
not.
don't even remember that, and I'm glad I don't.
Just take my word for it. All right, you don't need to go back down that road. So anyway, we meet Luz. The setting is great. I love it. I love the beginning of it, and the earth rumbling, and everything is everything's stuffed up, and he's running around. So then we meet Moridin as well. This is our first introduction. I suppose the first time you read it, you're kind of like, all right, this is the dark one. This is the big bad guy. But yeah, as we know, he is a big bad guy, but not the big bad guy. So traveling effect as well is something I noticed in this section. When he enters the room, the air shimmers as opposed to the normal way of traveling of the beam of light opening and rotating to step through. So we get right off the bat, we get that introduction to the true power and how it works differently. A couple of other things that popped out for me in this reread was that we know at this point, at least, that Luz Theron is saying that it's been 10 years for this battle. So we know that the war has lasted 10 years, and that's how long it took for them to close the bore again. But of course, this battle has been raging on for eternity. And yeah, that when he introduces himself again as Luz Theron Telemon, and the three named things. I was looking in because I've got that big white book, the companion book for the Wheel of Time, just doing a little reading of the Age of Legends. So everyone's born with two names. That's why the most important people have three. You have to earn that third name by doing great deeds for society. So that kind of optimistic future utopia that the Age of Legends is, and now everything is destroyed and moving on like that. So things that also popped up, the 9 rods of Dominion. We assume that one of those rods is still around, the Oath Rod that the Aes Sedai use, and it pops up a lot later on in the book. Yeah, full on, straight into spoilers, by the way. So there's none of that. So yeah, I'll just reminded me a lot of the Age of Legends, which is like my favorite part of this whole series. That great utopian time that everyone lived in. They didn't even know about war. They had never even heard of the Dark One. They were just living in utter hippie utopia, and had to learn very quickly and learn very well the arts of war. And there was things like teaching their children. This is all stuff that I'm getting from the companion, right? Not from the book itself. But just to give people some background into the Age of Legends, that when the war took over and they had to change their way of life, that they started training the kids from 10 years old to be warriors before they taught them about art and music, for example. So it was a huge, huge shift in their way of life. The boar as well, some interesting information about that was actually discovered by Lanfear and made by her. She was a scientist back in the day, and they were investigating this source of power that they had discovered, and she was trying to get to it, and she's actually the one that created the boar. She was known by a different name back then. But but anyway, so that's an interesting piece of trivia that I found. So this is all her fault. She seems very unapologetic.
Did you ever read the short story, The Strike at Shal Ghul?
I did. I had it all printed out. I think you printed it out at university for me on the university printers. And I remember that. Yeah, I do, but I don't remember the details.
It's got a lot of cool info about because it's presented. Robert Jordan wrote it as a piece of history from within the world, so it reads like a history textbook. But it's got cool bits of information in there about how the male and the female Aes Sedai, by and large, were of differing opinions about how to deal with the boar. Like once they broke through, and they built those massive sa'angreal, and but Luz Theron was saying, no, I want to take the 100 companions and go straight to the boar and seal it up there.
Yeah, well, there was only 100 because nobody else wanted to go with him. And thank God the women didn't go with him. Otherwise, the female side would have been tainted as well. So
totally,
that does, good choice, ladies.
Yeah.
Without going into too much detail, but the Dragonmount introduction just gives us a glimpse into Luz Theron and the madness of the taint, and that we know that it's been 10 years, so we're setting the stage. And then, of course, he gets healed, and the healing very, very different with the true power to the one power. A lot of pain involved. And then as his becomes more lucid, sees everyone that he's killed, realizes that he's the one that's murdered everyone, because first he thinks it's Moradin that's come and killed his whole family and all the servants and everything. And then of course travels next to the river where he draws on the power and creates Dragonmount in that epic scene, which I really hope the TV show nails, because
I hope they get it in there.
that guy drawing on the power and creating a volcano next to a river, that's going to be some epic TV if they do it right. And then you're creating the island that Tarvalon, depending on how you pronounce it, is one day created. So yeah, really setting the scene. I love that introduction. I've read it to prepare for this podcast like 5 times already.
Did you guys feel anything in terms of when Lews Therin is walking around the palace and he's looking around at all the dead bodies and stuff, and I think it's after he's healed and he realizes that Ilyana, that he's been shouting for the whole time, his wife and his children are all lying there slain by his hand. Reading that as a father sounds corny now, but I mean, reading that as a dad, that hit me way harder than it did when I was in high school. Like I just read, okay, cool, yeah, he killed everyone around him. Of course, he was mad and super powerful, but reading that now and him recognizing that he did that to his own family, I have a much better understanding of his mental state when he did go to that empty field and drew on Sidon and created a volcano where he stood. Like, I can understand that now.
Now that you mention it, yes.
Well, let's be honest. He was already at a very poor mental state with the one power. And at that moment of realization, he just used that power to totally decimate himself. It's and I mean, you can understand that if you have that moment of lucidness after pure insanity, and you see that you killed your kids. That's pretty intense.
That's fucked up.
Yeah, it's pretty.
Oh,
fucked
there it
up.
is. Just earned our R rating.
Ding one. Did you guys also notice, now I might be just looking for stuff to talk about now, which is probably true, but I mean, I'm going to do it anyway. When they are describing the palace in the prologue that he had destroyed, they make mention of lightning that sort of moved down the corridors, like this. He creates the sense that it was almost alive. I seem to recall something very similar being channeled by Rand in the Stone of Tyr.
Yes, that's correct. He took everyone out with one lot of lightning that ran along the roof.
All the shadows spawn.
All the shadows spawn.
Yeah. And now on this reread is the first time I drew that connection. It's like, okay, Rand was doing some of the exact same quote-unquote spells or weaves that Lews Therin was doing. So yeah, I just picked up on that.
The question is, was it Rand or was it Lewis at that time?
Yeah. Oh man, we're going to be debating that a lot.
a lot of debating coming.
We haven't even got out of the prologue yet. Yes.
No.
It's only another 4.5 million words to go. Don't worry, guys. We'll
What else, Villy? Is there anything else about the prologue that stood out to you that you want to just highlight or discuss?
Yeah, it was very interesting for me. The prologue is really flowery, very well written, very descriptive. But there was items that were undamaged, tapestries on the walls that weren't burned, that was just absolutely perfect still. So it was as if the chaos was focused and it wasn't random. It's not like a bomb went off. It was focused murder as a part to focused destruction. And that focused murder became reality and then ultimately became his own destruction. So I think there's something more probably to be read into that. But yeah, that stood out for me.
I also enjoyed, but took note of the fact that when Ishmael, or Baalzamon as he was known, as he's telling Lews Therin about the eternal battle between light and dark, and how the whole quest of the dark, I keep wanting to say the dark side, how their quest is to break the wheel of time and end the flow of time indefinitely. How these forces are destined to do battle for eternity, and how if the good guys are condemned to either eternal battle or defeat,
Mm.
and how the bad guys are either going to be locked in eternal battle or gain victory. Like the only real victory state is there for the bad guys. So, good luck, boys.
At least they get a break every couple of thousand years and forget about it all. And
Yeah, can put their feet up, grow some proper crops.
yeah.
So, Villy, do you want to take us into chapter 1?
Yes, and by far my most favorite chapter in everything that I've read. I have reread this chapter now a couple of times for this recording, but it sets a perfect scene. It's a perfect introduction to building tension. We've got Rand and Tam leading down the quarry road to get into Emmonsfield for the Beltane Festival, shipping some brandy and some ale with them. And it's very, very dense. It's cold, very little life, no animal noises. It is a scene set almost out of a horror movie. Rand is walking with his bow and arrow in his hand. The arrow's knocked. He's kind of on edge the whole time. And he proceeds to see the Dark Rider, which we all know now is the Madral or the Fade, Shadow Man, goes by many names. But very, very importantly, at the moment that he gazes into his eyes, he feels hate. And in the moment he feels that hate, his forearms on the inside of his arms prickles. So
Mhm.
to the point where he had to let go of his bow to scratch his arm, uncertain about what it was. And that kind of stood out there at that point. Now, if you don't know what that means, it plays a little bit into those dragon tattoos, I think.
Mhm.
And he trips over a stone, falls over, gathers himself on Bella's rein, and proceeds to tell Tam obviously about this. And Tam doesn't see anything, but Tam doesn't disregard him completely, which is a great thing. I mean, Tam has been set up to be such a solid character, a man of loads of experience, and we get to learn it later on in the chapters as well. But they make their way through that episode, get into the town, and we get a full introduction, obviously, of all the characters. A few of them, Matt. Uh, we speak about Perrin already in that introduction when it's his two best friends, Matt and Perrin. And we get into Emmonsfield then. Pleasantries gets exchanged, some not so pleasantries. Obviously, we've got some cynics in the village that's not happy with the wisdom being a young woman at the stage, naive and constant complaining. They haven't even made it to the inn, and they were already cornered by a bunch of people complaining to Tam about this. Now, Tam sits on the village council, and he seems to be the most level headed person on the council as well. And so as soon as they get there, eventually the mayor invites Tam into the inn, and Rand and Matt is tasked with unloading the barrels of ale. And Matt just wants to get on moving to go and release a badger that he had caught with one of his mates, mischievous Matt.
Always got another plan.
He's always got a badger ready to go.
But when Matt prompts Rand that has he has heard about it, Rand immediately mentions, "Oh, did you also see a Dark Rider?" Which completely threw Matt off because he didn't believe anyone else had also seen this Dark Rider cloaked figure. And going more into that, it's untouched by the wind cloak, covered from toes, on a black horse, no face, and the feeling of utter hate when both boys experiencing that this guy must either be the Dark One, and actually names it down, um, where Rand draws some sanity and says, no, he's bound with the Forsaken. So we get the mention of the Dark One, the Forsaken. The boys are actually aware of these characters. Although it is a whole age past that they've been locked down, they still remember it. The Forsaken is still being used in bedtime tales to scare the kids to go to bed.
Yeah.
So it's something that is really weighing heavy on them at that stage. And now we got two people that has seen this person. and both of them spoke to their parents about it, their dads.
Yeah. It's cool that we get sort of drip fed these hints of concepts and people and creatures and places and stuff super early. Like, I mean, chapter 1, you're seeing a fade. People are talking about the Dark One and the Forsaken, and I mean, those are all pivotal um, roles in the story throughout the series.
Yeah, there's no build up to these big characters on the dark on the from the dark.
No,
They are named out front, but
yeah.
there's a lot of time spent in building up the characters that walk in the light. A lot of slow progression of that characters that get built up, which is fantastic for me. I mean, I absolutely loved it.
Did you guys see who has been cast as Tam in the TV show?
No, we haven't. I haven't.
It's Roose Bolton from Game of Thrones.
Ooh. I'm wondering about that. No,
Mixed
I'm torn.
reactions.
Yeah, because of his past roles.
He's not going to be flaying anyone.
He'll always be Roose Bolton, that son of a.
I actually don't mind it.
Just wondering if the TV series is going to, because as they do with many of these books, there's so many characters. If they're going to start combining characters and getting rid of inevitably, and I wonder if one of those is going to be Tam, because in the beginning of the book, you kind of get this feeling that Tam is a major player. So he's going to be setting everything up. He's the level-headed guy that Jody was talking about.
Yeah.
They might combine him with some other characters down the road, because in the books he's there and then in the beginning and then just disappears for like 8 books or something. You never hear from him again.
Yes, and I actually found it quite not disappointing, because that puts too much of a negative spin on it. But I was kind of hoping for a bit more focus on Tam again in the later books. He's around again, and I mean, like, not just for a little bit. Like, he's traveling with Rand, like he's leading the Two Rivers Bowman, but he takes very much a backseat. Like, I don't think there are actually any chapters from his point of view. Yeah, he's sort of just also there, and I was hoping to get more out of that reunion between Rand and his dad, and then his dad being there for him.
Yeah.
But I guess at that point, Rand had already changed so much, and he had sort of gained a lot of support and father figures along the way.
Lan, yeah, I think Lan takes over that role of the character role of Tam, and kind of having both of them there along for the journey kind of be, I suppose, redundant.
And Moiraine.
And Moiraine, yes.
Anything else about that one? Pretty straightforward. See a fade on the road, get to town, unload the booze.
Get ready to party. It's Winternight.
Yeah.
And also, Matt is there. I think all three of us at some point have said that Matt is our favorite character.
Oh, for sure. Yeah.
He's definitely mine.
Perrin's a little bit of he's a bit boring. No offense. So stern. Matt's got a badger up his sleeve. He's ready to go.
He'll flower your dogs. Watch out. So the next chapter, Strangers. Matt and Rand unload the cart. They're busy walking into the cellar of the inn, and they run into Bran, Elvia's wife, and blah, blah, blah. They are sort of just chit-chatting while they're busy unloading the casks, and another younger boy shows up, Ewan, who I think they say is 14 or something, and they make mention of the fact that the years between Rand and Matt and Ewan sort of usually make them disregard everything he says, which means that Rand and Matt are obviously at least a couple years older than 14. I think I've always imagined them around 17, 18, around there.
Yeah, I'm sure that there's an official age for them in a guidebook somewhere along the line.
Probably pieced together from multiple clues. But that's sort of just what I've always had in my mind. And he tells them that strangers arrived in the town the previous night. And Ewan tells them that Moiraine called Nynaeve child, and that also sent it off the rails. So now, by this stage, I think 2 or 3 people have already made mention of Nynaeve's temper. But they go outside from the inn, and they're on the way to go look for everything. I mean, it's Beltane Festival. There's a lot of action in town. There are these strangers that Ewan just told them about. They know that the peddler's on his way. Matt has heard rumor of a gleeman. And as they walk outside, they notice this raven on the roof across the road, because before they actually see the raven, Rand feels again. He can feel on his skin someone is watching him. And he immediately looks up and makes eye contact with this raven that seems to be staring straight at him. And while he's looking at this thing, thinking hateful thoughts towards this raven, because he's tired of being watched, he realizes Matt is standing next to him and he's having the same thing. So, it seems pretty obvious that the raven is watching both of them. So they both quickly dip down, grab a rock, throw it at the raven. That just hops out of the way and just looks at them again. And they're both pretty taken aback at that. They've never seen a raven behave that way. And then suddenly the raven sort of shrieks and it just launches, the word they use is violently, up into the sky, to the point where there's just like a couple of feathers floating where it was. And it's Moiraine standing behind them that's joined them. And I'd never thought of this, but I wonder if she channeled at it. She might have
Probably.
actually channeled something because she can convince herself, it's Shadow Spawn, so she can use the power as a weapon and probably chased it away because she knows that they are servants of the Dark One.
Yeah, but this is cool is that both of their aims are true. Like if that thing hadn't moved, they would have both hit it with the stones. Like
These
you don't
boys
mess
can
with these
handle
kids.
themselves.
Yeah.
So then, obviously, okay, so now all the boys meet Moiraine and she introduces herself to them. In this exchange, she gives both Matt and Rand a coin that she deliberately folds into their hand with both of her hands. And she tells them, now that I've given you this coin, we have a bond, sort of under the pretenses that I might call on you for some errands or something like that. But everyone's reading between the lines. You wouldn't get some other coin that's not special and he's already thinking about spending it. But Rand and Matt decide they are not going to spend this money. And while I was reading this, obviously as a reread, I'm reading about Moiraine, talking to the boys, and there's no mention of Lan, which is odd because warders are always there. And then sure enough, at the end of the chapter, as Moiraine walks away, a man that they hadn't noticed before, tall man, chiseled features, moves like a wolf, the cloak of grey and green and brown that just blends into the background, moves away from the door at the inn. And of course, Lan was there the whole time, always in control, always knew what was going on.
Yeah. Classic Lan.
Classic Lan. It's just, the warders immediately captured my imagination when I read the books the first time.
No, definitely does. There's a lot of good description around him. A very strong, big man that moves lightly and quickly and is not seen. It's fantastic.
Have you seen the casting for Lan for the show? Who it is?
I have. I've actually watched a video of him talking about being on the show as well.
What do you think of his casting?
I like it. He's a guy that's performed in a lot of physical roles. He seems to know what he's talking about when it comes to fight choreography, which is what the video was about that I watched. And then he also just mentioned that he's worked on some big movies and some TV shows, I think, but he said that the sets and things that he saw for this show are unlike anything he's ever seen. So that all bodes well for the quality of the production value of the show.
Yeah, I read the other day as well, the production has restarted after the whole COVID-19 lockdown.
Yes.
So we are on track for a 2021 TV show.
Woo!
Which I'm sure is going to disappoint and thousands of people and have the complete opposite effect on others.
They give a quick physical description of Moiraine as well. Obviously, they mention her ageless looks, the fact that she is attractive, but they also mention that she barely reaches Rand's chest. She's very small. She's very diminutive.
She's tiny,
but she carries an air of grace and authority that makes it seem like everyone that's taller than her is lanky and gangly. Like she's the right height. Everyone else is too tall.
Yeah.
And they also mentioned the little stone that she's wearing on a thin chain that's hanging on her forehead. And I can't remember, but I'm pretty sure that's also an Ungreal.
I think it is, yes.
It is, yes.
I think you find that out later. Yeah, and I mean, the chapter just ends with the peddler arriving.
Ah, yes. That guy.
That guy.
We're going to earn our R rating in this chapter.
Yes.
That son of a bitch.
All right, so Joe, why don't you take us to the peddler?
Yeah. Kind of luck of the draw to get this chapter to review. So anyway, this dick arrives in town in a giant wagon. right off the bat, you can look at this guy and go, I don't like him. You have no idea how much you're going to dislike him. But when he arrives, he's self-important. People describe him as, he's the peddler that comes once or twice a year, whatever. But he thinks of himself as a glee man. He's got all these big stories and these gestures, and he really thinks he is just the bee's knees. And so he arrives. Everybody's running out to get their needles, their yearly supply of needles that their wife sent them to get. Everybody's excited, of course, they get in this whole small town environment, these simple folk, the whole hero's journey storyline again. Mm-hmm. Like Rand is really from backwater town. So that you get to go shopping once a year. And the peddler's in town, so he gives them a brief, but he brings all the bad news. All right, there's war in Geldian, and there's, the false dragon has risen up, and blah, 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 blah. Everybody's freaking out. And as he starts opening his big mouth, the town council is there, so they rope him in and drag him into the inn to go have a fat chat with him. And and basically then everyone's left around waiting. So there we have old Matt and Perrin and Rand. Now we've discovered that all three of them have seen the rider in black, I'm pretty sure at this point, if I recall correctly. Mm-hmm. And we're chatting to Egwene as well, who we meet there, and Nynaeve as well, because she's just shadowing Nynaeve everywhere she goes, because she's supposed to be the apprentice or something. So so we meet all the kids are hanging out together. So this is like Beltane night, this is the night of the big party once a year. All the kids are gathering, all the friends are getting together. But like Billy mentioned earlier, you got this undertone of tension building. It's supposed to be this great night, but there's just bad news, and it's cold, and crops are failing, and everybody's suspicious. But anyway, this is something as well that reminded me of when they unlocked when they drilled the bore into the Dark One's prison. That it wasn't enough for him to come out, but enough for him to influence the world. And everybody just immediately got suspicious. Everybody got angry. Everything, all the negative aspects of humanity are brought out because of his touch on the world. And this is exactly what's happening here as well. Everybody's just suspicious. Everybody's angry. I mean, the seals on his prison are weakening, so you can see this in the world. And and basically in this chapter, all we get to see really is the introduction of Payton Fane and the kids getting together and describing their experiences with this rider in black, with this Madrol, obviously. Then we find that later. So basically that's all I got from this chapter. I didn't get much further than that, because in the next chapter, more stuff happens. But it's just everybody getting together. Payton Fane is the main character of this chapter, but they just take him out and put him in a room with the town council for the rest of the chapter. So we don't really know what's happening. But that's as far as I got. Did you guys get anything that I perhaps didn't get from this chapter?
Yeah, Payton Fane's an arsehole.
I got that.
Look, I mean, the first time you read the story, it's obvious. It's written in such a way that there can be no doubt as to whether you should be liking this person or not. He has a joyless laugh. He never gets close to anyone. He has this air of self-importance. He thinks that everyone should be listening to him. I mean, Rand at one point says, just trying to shout over the noise of the crowd at Perrin, we'll do something later. But as he says the last sentence, Payton Fane had climbed up on the wagon, so everyone kept quiet. So Rand shouted out, "Yes, later." Yeah. And Payton Fane just reacts and he goes, "No, I'll talk now," sort of thing. It's just like, oh, fuck off, man. And now on a reread, you already know he's already a dark friend and has been a dark friend for ages. So just straight up fuck this guy.
I think that may have affected my reread of this chapter, because I don't remember much. Probably selling stuff. Get out of here.
The only thing that I now on this reread am trying to do is when they talk about things like war in Gildan and that someone has raised the dragon banner. Everyone, I don't know, everyone, I think Tam or someone comments or thinks that, Gildan, that's so far away, it's it's this place of legend. It's their neighboring country. It's right around the corner. I mean, okay, granted, they've got some natural barriers between them and Gildan, the White River and the Shadow Forest or Forest of Shadows, something like that. Some place that no one has gone to and returned, and everyone just sort of agrees it's 100 miles of forest with no roads or farms, and there's just bears and wolves. Yeah. So people don't go there much, and it speaks a bit to why people keep referring to Eamon's Field as sort of this backwater town, because It really is closed off from the rest of the world. They've got a massive swamp bog called the Maya on the eastern side, and on the western side is the Mountains of Mist. So the only way you can actually get, no one can cross the River White, which is to the south. So the only way you can get to Eamon's Field is coming down over the Tarrant River at Tarrant Ferry, coming via Watch Hill, coming down the road, and then you get to Eamon's Field, and then Devon Ride is even further south, right at the actual River White.
Hmm.
So yeah, so peddlers, gleemen, strangers like Moraine and Lan, that look like lords and ladies arriving in Eamon's Field is a massive surprise to people because they just do not go there. Nobody goes there. It's also why later in the books, the people from Eamon's Field almost don't think of themselves as citizens of Andor.
Yeah.
Like they're this own, like, just leave us alone. We're just here doing our own thing. Just don't bother us. But yeah, like Gildan, where Logain is raising the dragon banner, is not that far away, guys. Don't get too complacent.
Yeah, as the crow flies, it's literally they share a border with him. Yeah, but that
Yeah,
is true what you say, and well chosen by Tam. I mean, he was looking for the arse end of the world to hide the dragon reborn, or this kid he found on a mountain.
yeah,
So yeah, good place to do it.
totally. Yep. So not a lot out of that chapter. Vinny, you want to take us to the next one?
Yeah, this is a great one. Absolutely great one. We get introduced to the Gleeman now. Tom Merrilin, a fantastic man. He's snow white hair, snow white eyebrows, big moustache, deep blue eyes, and noticeably upset. He arrived the night before in the village, late at night. He had to bash the door and wake people up. Nearly got his head bitten off by the mayor for coming so late and traveling so late at night. Obviously, not something you are supposed to do. But in his own words, the idiots told him it would be a day's ride to the next village, but they didn't tell him he had to leave early. So he came late. And as he walked down from waking up in the inn, he got downstairs and sort of got shied out by the stares of men. So again, made his way outside to see the gathering crowd and immediately made eye contact with Rand, noticeably because Rand is so much taller. And then we got the first description of he's likened to an Aiel man, and with the same reddish hair. And he said, "You're not from here," looking at Rand. Then a little bit later on, let's go back because he also makes a reference to Peyton Fane. He says that there's a reference to him. He's more
He knows it.
raven than man, and he's quick to carry bad news. So he clearly knows him, and he's already got a dislike for him. Tom decides to obviously do what Gleemans does and do a backflip somersault onto a old stone foundation, and immediately starts juggling 3 balls and give them a little sampler of what he's going to be doing for them that night, because after all, he's there to make money through stories and musical instruments. So that gets going there. The crowd gathers. They demanding what stories he'll be telling. He pretty much give them snippets. We've got little examples of stories that get raised, and then people start yelling out. And one of them that stands out is Egwene asking him to tell the story of someone that flew up in the fiery belly of a dragon.
Len that flew to the moon in the belly of a eagle made of fire or something.
So there's all these stories that point back to the ages and continuously things that touch on it, which is really great. Perrin and Rand and Matt are now together, and they kind of want to talk about this thing because we also learned that Perrin has also seen the dark rider in dark. And as all of this starts clearing out, and finally the Gleeman is allowed to go back in to the inn to have now finally a glass of mulled wine and a pipe.
Probably some of that brandy.
Probably some of that. Actually, it was the brandy. He wanted to go in muttering under his breath, "It's time for a brandy," when Sen came out with his cynical comments and continuously making cynical comments, that old man. Then Tam pulls Rand aside and says, "No, get the horse. We're going. We're leaving." And well, Rand knows better to argue with Tam about such things, and he listens. Basically, he was
Mm,
upset that they're not staying for Winternight, but they gather their things. Rand puts his cloak on, he gets his arrow, again knocks an arrow, and they start doing the Quarry Road walk back to the Westwood where they farm. And when they were a decent distance out of the town, Tam decided to start speaking to Rand and also informs him that two other boys in the town had seen the Dark Rider. So it's a total of five of them. Ban and Lem also reported to their parents of seeing on the edges of the village this Dark Rider. Uh, and this has now uh, got Tam spooked. Uh, they agreed to set up patrols between Devon Ride and Watch Hill,
mhm,
just giving the village the story that look, it's probably people fleeing from the war,
mm,
or just a sheep thief or a chicken thief, but we'll scare him off by putting up these patrols and getting it done. But Tam is very wary. He also said to Rand, like, this is now the time to be a little bit more vigilant, and that's why he wants to get back to the farm. Um,
which is a massive bummer because it's winter night. It's like the big party night before the Beltane Festival the next day, where everyone's going to everyone's houses and everyone's socializing and everything. And Tam says, "Okay, let's grab the horse back on the old road, back to the farm in the middle of nowhere, just you and me."
Yeah, Rand's got a big night planned with his girl, the Queen. Maybe
Mm-hmm.
sneak a first kiss in there or something. No, 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 no. Totally blocked by his dad.
Cock
cock
block.
blocked.
Thanks, Dad.
So, well, Rand immediately also has a very big sense of relief now that he does feel that Tam believes him. And he wanted to turn around to go back to tell Matt and Perrin, hey, they believe us, that this is real, it's not us. So they're obviously feeling a great sense of responsibility and also wants to join in on the watch. They want to be part of the patrols. They are
Yeah.
becoming men now. That plays into them sort of being that 17, 18-year-old age. They also mentioned that all those boys are of age to get married at that festival. It's kind of the dancing around the pole that was set up in the green. All the girls that are of age are going to dance around the pole, and the men's got to sing. And I think he was hoping for his love Egwene there.
A lot of pole dancing going on. Sounds like a great
Yeah.
time.
We also see Tom meet Moraine. Tom is on the wall, busy
Oh,
telling a story and juggling. And when Moraine comes up to him, he stops. He stops talking and he catches all the balls. He puts everything away and he stops his entire performance. Um, and they have a bit of an exchange. Now, Villy, I don't know if you actually know this, but the spoiler warning at the start of this episode is obviously also aimed at you since you've only read up to book 11. And Tom and Moraine actually end up together
No
in a
way.
romantic capacity.
oh no.
Yes. So,
Billy's mind is blown.
so it was very interesting reading this exchange in that light because it is sort of like, they are being sort of coy with each other because she talks about, like she likes some stories but she doesn't like others, and Tom's like, don't worry, you're gonna like all my stories, don't you worry about that.
Nah, that a lot of that comments make sense because they do exchange good pleasantries,
They
but
do.
Rand picks up that Tom is noticeably upset with her being in the village. Like that's when he walks into the inn, sort of rumbling under his breath about time to get a brandy. Now
Yeah.
think about first thing in the morning going to swig brandy. It's you kind of hit the ales first with some mulled wine, but he's going straight for the
It's a
brandy.
natural order to these things. It's your mulled wine before your brandies.
That's the universal order of things. Come on, man. But yeah, we find out a lot about old Tom's past. He's a colorful dude. I mean, Aes Sedai in the mix. There's a couple of queens in there too, or maybe just one.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, he's a man of the world.
He's one of the
Quite.
biggest characters in the whole series for me up into where I read. There's a huge amount that he brings to the story.
Totally. I also love him. He is great. Like he's almost too good to be true, you know, to have this wizened old man of the world who also just happens to be extremely athletic for an old guy and can throw a knife across a room and hit a card against the wall. You know, like he can do all kinds of cool shit that is really great to read. It really translates well into this kind of setting.
I'm wondering if the story and the order of the chapters is done like this on purpose by Robert Jordan. First introducing Peyton Fane, and then it's like a juxtaposition. The next one we get Tom Merrilin, because they are completely opposite characters. Yeah, after reading about Peyton Fane, you kind of need to wash yourself with a chapter on Tom Merrilin. Get that stink off you.
Yeah.
But yeah.
Something else I noted here is that Egwene being sort of volunteering for apprenticeship with Nynaeve to be a wisdom, and then also asking Tom for stories about Len flying to the moon. Rand thinks to himself internally, he's like, she's displaying all this talk of adventure and sort of showing already a desire to break free from what is expected of her in this little town. And as you read on, you realize, that is exactly the case. Like, she basically invites herself on the trip. She rocks up out of nowhere when they're trying to leave the inn in the middle of the night, which we'll get to soon. But she definitely is showing some backbone. And a desire to break out of this little bubble that is Emansfield or the Two Rivers.
So she pulls a Samwise Gamgee there.
Yeah.
All right, so Moritz, isn't it time for your chapter recap?
It's time for Winternight. This is going to be a great episode of the show. It's the first sort of like actiony sequence that we get in the story. I mean, I say it's the first as if we've been waiting for it for ages, but it's pretty early on in the story.
It's still in the first day of the story. The sun has just risen and set.
Yeah, so 12 hours have passed yet. I think this might be all in episode 1.
It could very well be.
This would be a nice way to end it.
The chapter is basically Rand and Tam hit the road. They take Bella back to the farm, and they get this sort of like mid to late afternoon. And Tam, being the farmer dad that he is like, okay, well, sun's still up. Let's get to some chores. And Rand has to like stable Bella. He does some hoeing of the vegetable garden. He eventually starts chopping wood. And he gets so sort of zoned out and zen about chopping wood that when his dad taps him on the back, he realizes it's gotten dark. And Tam saying, come inside, let's get ready for some supper. So as they come in, Tam gives Rand a couple of chores, boil some water for the kettle and everything. But that afternoon, also Tam just sort of does a circuit of the farm holding a spear. Like he's walking around looking at the ground, obviously looking for, tracker signs of anyone being there. He takes a cautious sip of water from the well and then realizes, okay, no one's been here and everything's fine. That's when they set off on their chores. And then when they go get ready for supper, Rand notices that Tam goes and finds the big iron key for the front and the back door, and he locks the doors. And Rand sort of is a little taken aback at that because he's never done that. And while he's also preparing the kettle, he hears Tam upstairs, a scraping from the room upstairs, which he can only imagine is Tam pulling the chest out from underneath the bed, which Rand in all his life had never seen Tam do. And then when Tam comes back downstairs again, he's wearing a sword belt with this beautiful sword with a bronze heron on both the scabbard and the hilt. And when he draws it and he shows it to Rand, Rand sees that it's like a slightly curved blade with one sharp edge. It's basically described as something resembling a katana with a slightly different hilt. And the sword is obviously something special. I mean, the heron marks we obviously know now are the marks of a blade master. The blade master swords, now correct me if I'm wrong, I think are power wrought.
Some of them are, and others aren't. Some that were made after the breaking of the world are just made of the best quality swords that you can buy, but there are power wrought ones and just regular ones.
Right, because Rand notices that it basically looks like land sword, except it's got these herons on it. And then while they're getting ready to have supper, there's a thud on the door, and then it gets smashed in, and a Trolloc comes in the door and it shields its eyes. Now, just before that happens, when Rand is describing, or when you are told of what the inside of the sort of kitchen area looks like, they mentioned that Tam was extravagant with the candles and that he had lit a large fire. And later in the chapter, Tam mentions that he knows that Trollocs are blinded by bright light. And I have to imagine that he specifically made it bright in there, even if it isn't Trollocs, to sort of confuse or disorient anyone coming in from the pitch black of outside into this bright room. So if anyone attacked them,
Yeah.
they would be blinded by the light. Just another indication of Tam's sort of, just knowledge. He's a sharp dude. He knows what the fuck he's doing.
But isn't this something that goes back to that meeting they were having in town, that they had discussed about the rider, and like they had taken the boys seriously because there'd been 4 reports or something about this?
Yeah,
So
yeah. I
he
mean,
knew
he's walking
something was
around with a
coming.
spear and he went and got the sword and he
Yeah.
locked the doors, right? So he knows something is up, but this is just like a cool trick that I'd never noticed before, like, okay, make it super bright. And because if you walk from a dark room into a bright room, it is kind of hard to adjust your eyes. So anyway, the Trolloc bursts in. Rand throws a kettle of boiling water at this thing's face, and while it's still screaming about the hot water, Tam kills it, and immediately behind it, another one bustles in. Tam kills that. So he shouts to Rand to run away, and Rand runs to the back door, which is now locked, and he can't get out of it. So he looks out the window, he opens the window, and as he jumps out the window, the back door comes crashing in, and Trollocs from outside burst into the back room, and Rand has now just jumped out the window. So do you guys think that is a result of him being Taveran? The fact that this one time the door is locked and he can't get out of it is when Trollocs are about to burst through it from the other side, and he goes out the window and misses them completely, and they don't even see where he's gone.
Totally.
Probably.
So he jumps out the window, he runs out, he runs into, I think he runs towards the forest and then quickly doubles back and does like a belly crawl back to the barn area so he can keep an eye on the house. And he hears a lot of commotion, obviously, and Tam jumps out the front window and lands on his feet. But instead of running away, he runs to the back of the house because Rand reckons Tam heard him there. Rand shouted from there that they're coming in from the back before he ran away. And then Rand shouts at him again from the sort of barn area. Tam cottons onto where he is and sort of pretends as if he's shouting to someone in the forest to run out of there, and follows him. And then the Trollocs follow him into the woods. So he's completely misdirected them. So when things have quietened down a bit, Rand sort of sneaks into the woods again, but then he feels a hand on his mouth, and it's Tam that sort of found him in the woods again. And Rand's about to struggle free, and Tam's like, whoa, slow down, buddy. Don't hurt me. I've forgotten how much you've grown in the last couple of years. And they start talking about, like what's going on. Tam gives him a couple clues about they can smell, Trollocs can smell really well. They can hunt by sound. You've got to be extra, extra careful. And even in this exchange, Tam sort of starts sagging down and lying down, and he mentions that he's got a scratch and that, there's nothing much to be done for it. And Rand says, okay, cool. He's going to quickly sneak back to the house, get some supplies, and they can make it back to town. So before Rand goes, he grabs Tam's sword and he quietly sneaks his way back into the house, gets back in the house, sees a couple of dead Trolloc bodies. When he's made sure that it's safe, he goes inside to get some stuff, and then he hears, some scuffling behind him, and one of the Trollocs has gotten up. Trolloc tries to convince him to stay there, jumps on him. Rand's got the sword. Actually, Rand has the sword out in front of him, and when the Trolloc says, no, it's fine, don't worry, the Midral just wants to talk to you. I mean, come on. Rand actually puts his hands down by his side, and then as the Trolloc lunges at him, he brings the sword up again. So he is fast enough to actually react without any kind of training to have this Trolloc impale himself on the sword. Rand works himself out from under him, gathers a couple supplies, goes back to find Bella and the cart, but Bella is gone, and the cart's wheels are smashed. So he decides he's going to make a pallet, and he hacks off the struts for the cart to use in making a pallet. And it's like, I think they describe it as old ash wood or something like that. And he hacks both of them off. But then he looks at the sword and it doesn't look dull at all. Like he realizes that he hacks it, it looked dulled. Yeah, it didn't leave a mark. It's still gleaming, which is why I thought that maybe this is one of those power wrought
I think it is, yeah.
Blade Master Blades. He gets back to Tam, and Tam has really deteriorated. Tam is looking really, really bad. And that's pretty much where we end. He doesn't even make the pallet and take him back to town yet. It's just like, okay, here you are in the forest with your dad who's dying because he has Tam even says, oh, at least the weather is warming. And Rand thinks, no, I'm still freezing my nuts off. It is freezing here. And he realizes that his dad's got a fever, and he touches him and he can feel that, yeah, he's really, really sick. And the only wound he can find on him is that little scratch along his ribs. Yeah, and then steels himself for a big night.
That's kind of like a trope in all fantasy things, fantasy stories about these blades of the bad guys, that if you get cut by them, it happens in the Lord of the Rings as well. We know later on that Payne Fane's dagger from Shadow Logoth as well. Like a lot of, like, just don't get cut, I think is the... if they're going to cut you, just let them kill you. That's step one.
Lot of inspiration from Lord of the Rings, obviously, throughout this series. Yeah, so that's basically the last chapter that we'll cover today. That's straight action, right? There's not an awful lot apart from the sword and maybe hints at Tam's past that you can glean from that. Just a good old-fashioned action fight sequence and flight into the night.
Now, there's something you mentioned there as well when you mentioned that he has Rand has no training, but yet he's so quick. Technically, I think he has an eternity of training in his mind.
Touché.
Yeah, touché. He's been training for forever, literally. So yeah, maybe that's coming through. I mean, he's Taviran as well. He's got a lot going for him. There's a lot of otherworldly things, protecting him.
There sure is.
Yeah, we didn't touch on Tam teaching Rand about the void and the flame, which becomes a very big part, obviously, of Rand when he starts channeling. His ability to channel in on that. And Tam says to him, fill your head and put all the anger and hate and fear into the flame until you become a void. And there's only the void and the flame, which is a topic that goes all the way through, which is the same technique that Tam uses at the Beltane Festival every year to win the archery competition. He's got skill because he fought many wars and killed many, many people.
Look, I mean, for Tam to possess a blade, a Heron Mark blade, you have to assume that he was a blade master, and that because the only way you get them is by defeating another blade master and taking their sword. I believe. I think that is the only way that you can
I
get
hope
them.
so, because that sounds cool.
Now, if perhaps the reason why Tam is not so touched on in the entire series as we all had hoped is perhaps Robert Jordan, in the writing of it, as he had with New Spring and the rest, maybe thought of a separate story to go back and tell that story of Tam and the war and finding Rand. That could have been possibly in the woodwork.
I would read it.
I would definitely read it.
Tam.
Yeah.
I love Tam. Yeah. I also like how at one point when Rand is talking about his bow and walking back to the farm, there's no way that he can walk with a bow drawn, because besides Rand, only Tam and maybe a handful of other people can actually fully draw it once, let alone hold it drawn. And that's just another hint at those two river bows that are often mentioned. These guys use like really big long bows and can shoot incredible distances with incredible accuracy. And I just like that Rand is already proficient with this bow that very few other people can actually even use. They can't even draw it. So yeah, that reinforces that thing about these boys are, they're farm boys, but they are very, very capable, at least physically.
Now, do you guys believe that, as we've got it in this recording, this podcast, that this is potentially how the first episode would run, ending off with this and the dread of Tam busy dying with a fever and saying, all right, roll it, credits, next episode?
Possibly.
Because this is enough to fill up an episode. I mean, how many chapters is this in the book? Like 6, I think?
5,
6.
yeah. Prologue and 5 chapters.
So 6 in total. Yeah, it seems short in the book. You get through it really quickly, and a lot of shit happens along the way. I mean, very quickly. Like you said, there's a lot. There's mention of Dark Friends and Shadow Spawn from the beginning, and all the stories about the Age of Legends. Huge information dump, but I think as a TV show, because you also meet all the main characters, a lot of character introduction in this that can be done as well, and then end with a big bang of them fighting Trollocs. At least I hope they don't just show Trolloc bashing through the door and then wait until next week. Yeah, screw you.
Yeah.
So
Nah,
yeah,
that would be terrible.
they're gonna do it. Mark my words.
I read in some casting news that they have cast a character that only appears in A New Spring. So there is a possibility of either flashbacks
Hmm.
or maybe even starting the show with, the Amelin seat at that time doing that sort of speech about the dragon being reborn and dropping dead. Um,
Oh.
that is when Rand is born on the slopes of Dragonmount. Um, that's when A New Spring is set. That's where it
Mm.
starts. So they might actually, hint at that. Maybe you even see Tam find the baby, or a set of hands reach down and pick up a baby. Who is it? We
Oh,
know.
yeah.
Yeah.
It'll be interesting to see. Pity we have to wait so long, but
Oh, well, we've got something to keep us busy, don't we?
yeah.
Yes, and then some. So favorite moment. Do you guys have a favorite out of all the material that we've covered in this episode? What would you say is your favorite moment, or your favorite thing, or your favorite concept?
For me, it's definitely the suspense build-up of chapter one. It is set so beautifully. It is set so scarily dark. You feel that tension. If you read it the first time, you really feel anxious. And I suppose it comes along with me reading this for the first time after the first release of the Fellowship of the Ring. So you had a sense of the Nazgul in your head. It was already a
Mm,
bit of fear there, and it was very it's a point for me that how much tension and fear is set in there. You could feel what Rand felt when he gazed into the black face, and he felt that hate, and his arms started prickling. It's
totally. You also mentioned there's no animal sounds.
yeah,
The wind is blowing. Like they're walking down this rocky quarry road. There's no sound in the forest all around them, and this cold wind is tugging at their cloaks. And then this mysterious rider appears who doesn't seem to be affected by the wind. It is. There's a lot of tension. There's tension in the town as well. I mean, there's sort of excitement about Beltane, but there's also this undercurrent from the boys, from Paden Fane when he shows up. The strangers are there, the Glee Man, everyone, no one is just having a gay old time, everyone is sort of sussing everyone else out. And now you've got this information about this fade that's, skirting the town and stuff. You're right. Like that tension is palpable. How about you, Joe?
Definitely meeting Pain Fane. Not no. Towards the end, the end of that, where we see Tam, whip out that Heron Mark sword and slice down a few Trollocs, as you do, just on a typical
Yeah.
Sunday afternoon stroll.
There's 4 bodies in the house when Rand goes back.
I'm wondering how many more bodies were in the woods. Bodies they'll never find.
And a dozen followed Tam into the woods, but since they both still feel like they're hunting them, who knows how many were out there.
Yeah, but I'm certain he took down more than four.
Yes,
Yeah, and Rand got his
assured.
first one. So yeah, the action sequence that for me, because I mean, but that is the culmination of what Billy was talking about, all this built up tension. You know something's coming. You know
Yes,
from
yeah.
chapter one, something is on its way, blah blah blah, and it's building up and building up and building up, and it's not just him, it's his buddies, and then the town council's talking about it, and then yeah, Heron Mark sword to the face. It's excellent, love it.
And then adventure breaks down the door.
As
there
it
we go.
tends to do in these stories.
My favorite moment, I would have to say, is the land reveal. Just when he's
Ah,
standing at the inn. I am such a sucker for anything land related. His whole persona is, I mean, it's probably a little bit stereotyped. The sort of cold, honorable warrior with experience, and is not scared of anything. Even his horse, you find out later, is like this
Mandog, isn't it?
incredible war horse that, you know, in the fights is like biting at Trollocs and stomping them to death and stuff. He's just like, nobody else can ride him. It's only Lan. It's just when reading it now, like I said, I was wondering, like, Moraine is just talking to the boys. Why aren't they noticing Lan? Or why don't they make mention of him? Where is he? He's not there.
He's doing his job.
At the end of that scene, he just moves away from the wall at the end, and I'm like, oh yes, there is my man.
I mean, he is such an influential character, Lan, yeah, definitely. Still to this day. I mean, I'm a 40-something-year-old father, and for example, the other day, cutting stuff in the kitchen for dinner, cut my finger, and I made such a big deal about it. In the back of my mind, I think, would Lan make such a big deal about it? This guy's been sliced to death 1,000 times. You know, be more of a man. Be like Lan, you know? Still to this day, 20 years later.
I thought that maybe after you'd cut yourself, you look at your children and think to yourself, duty, lighter than a feather, heavier than a mountain.
No, just I'm a huge wuss. I'm nothing like Lan. That's all I got from that.
Cool. Okay, so I think that pretty much brings us to the end of our first episode. If you've made it this far, thanks.
Yeah.
Thanks for listening to our inane ramblings. I'm sure that if you made it this far, you are obviously also a fan and you can just nerd out with us. In our next episode, we will cover chapters 6 through 11. So ending at the end of the road to Tarrant Ferry. Villy and I think, have both read further than that already on this reread, and from what I recall, there's not an awful lot that is made known, but the adventure certainly does kick off. So I think that's a good number of chapters for us to cover in the next episode.
I'm excited.
Yeah. All right, gentlemen. With that, we'll call it a day. So everyone, keep reading, and we'll see you next time.